Okay, this is our new packet, Module 4. It's called Operations with Fractions. All right, so in this module, we're going to learn how to multiply fractions. We're going to learn how to add and subtract fractions and divide fractions and divide fractions and mixed numbers. The first lesson is lesson 4.1a. And this is on using GCF or applying GCF to multiplying fractions, right? We're going to be multiplying fractions and we're going to use GCF to reduce to simplest form, okay? So here we go. To multiply fractions, you first multiply the numerators. That's the top number, okay? And then multiply the denominator. That's the bottom numbers, okay? So to multiply fractions, first you multiply the top numbers together, and then you multiply the bottom numbers together. So here's an example. This fraction, 1/3, the numerator is 1. This fraction, 3/5, the numerator is 3. So we have 1/3 times 3/5. We're going to multiply the numerators. 1 times 3 is 3. Then we're going to multiply the denominators. 3 times 5 is 15. Okay? But we're not done because the product or the answer needs to be written in lowest terms. Okay? The product needs to be written in lowest terms. Sometimes you'll hear people say you have to reduce the fraction to lowest terms, or you have to simplify the fraction to lowest terms. Okay, it's all the same thing. There are two methods to make sure the product is in lowest terms. So there are two ways to do this. First, you can multiply, like we did up here. You can multiply, and then you can reduce after you multiply. So let's do that one first. So with this method, we're going to multiply first and then reduce, okay? So 1 times 3 is 3. 3 times 5 is 15. We're going to reduce by dividing by the greatest common factor. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the greatest common factor for 3 and 15. Well, the greatest common factor for 3 and 15 is 3. So we're going to divide 3 by 3, and we're going to divide 15 by 3, and we're going to get 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 15 divided by 3 is 5. And that is the answer to this problem in lowest terms. Now, some of you are intimidated by dividing. Remember, when we use the GFC of 3, we go 3 times 1 is 3, and 3 times 5 is 15. So there's our reduced fraction, 1/5 right there, okay? So if you're intimidated by the dividing, remember that the GCF factors are numbers in a multiplication problem. So 3 times what will give me 3? Well, 3 times 1. 3 times what will give me 15? Well, 3 times 5. So 1/5 is our reduced fraction, okay? So that's how you simplify or reduce to lowest terms after you do the multiplication. You can also do it before, and that's called cross-canceling. And eventually, if you do it this way, this is actually easier if you learn how to do it, okay? So let's take a look at this. Here's what we have. This, again, 1/3 times 3/5. But before we multiply, we're going to find one numerator and one denominator. that have a greatest common factor. Now, when I say one numerator and one denominator, it doesn't matter which numerator, and it doesn't matter which denominator. It's just one of them. So they don't have to be in the same fraction, okay? So in this problem, these two factors, 1/3 times 3/5, remember factors are the numbers in a multiplication problem. I have a 3 for this numerator is 3. This denominator is 3. Those two numbers have common factor of 3, right? Because 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 1 is 3. So 3 is the common factor for both of those numbers. So I can divide, right? I can now divide the one numerator and the one denominator by their greatest common factor before I multiply. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So now what I have is 1 over 1, 1 over 1 times 1 over 5. Now that part might have been a little tricky, so you might want to rewind and watch the last 30 seconds again. I basically reduced the fraction before I multiplied by using the greatest common factor for one numerator and one denominator, okay? That's important. Now I multiply. Now I multiply the numerators. Then I multiply the denominators. Okay, so that means 1 times 1, which is 1, 1 times 5, which is 5. If you do the reducing or simplifying to lowest terms before you multiply, the multiplication numbers are much smaller, all right? So if you need to watch these two parts again, you can. That is basically multiplying fractions and then reducing to simplest terms, or reducing to simplest terms first and then multiplying. Okay, now we're going to go on to basically same thing. We're still multiplying with fractions, but now we're going to do whole numbers and mixed numbers. So to multiply a whole number or a mixed number times a fraction, you have to first make them into fractions. Okay, basically A over B, fractions. Okay, how do you write these rational numbers in fraction form? This is just a little review because we did this in the last module. To write a whole number as a fraction, you use a 1 as the denominator. So you do 34 over 1. That is the same as 34. To do a mixed number as a fraction, first you're going to find the numerator. You're going to multiply the denominator by the whole number and then add the numerator. So multiply the 5 times the 3 and then add the numerator. So 5 times 3 is 15 plus 2 is 17. Okay, that's the numerator. You're going to keep the same denominator. The denominator is 5, so you will keep the denominator 5. So to multiply fractions that have a whole number or a mixed number, you have to first turn them into the form of a fraction. All right, so let's practice that. All right, here we go. A class has 18 students in it. The teacher asks how many students in the class have pets. And she finds out that 5/9 of the students have pets. Well, how many students is that? What we want to find out is what is 5/9 of 18? That is multiplication. So we're going to do 18 times 5/9. Well, that's a whole number, so we're going to put a 1 as the denominator. Now, in this case, I could multiply across 18 times 5 to get my numerator, and I could multiply 1 times 9 to get my denominator. But I don't know what 18 times 5 is. So I'm going to cross cancel before I multiply. I'm going to reduce before I multiply, okay? So the reason I know I can do that is because 18, one numerator, and 9, one denominator, have a common factor, 9. 18, right? 9 times 2 is 18. 9 times 1 is 9. So 9 is a common factor for both 9 and 18. So I can divide by 9. So if I divide 18 divided by 9, I'm going to get 2. 9 divided by 9, I'm going to get 1. So now I have 2 over 1 times 5 over 1. Okay, now I can do my multiplication. So I'm going to say what I did again. I found the common factor for 18 and 9. One numerator and one denominator. Doesn't matter that they're not in the same fraction when it's a multiplication problem. One numerator and one denominator. Common factor for 18 and 9 is 9. So I divide both of them by 9. 18 divided by 9 is 2. 9 divided by 9 is 1. So now I've reduced before I multiply. So I now have 2 over 1 times 5 over 1, 5 over 1. So now I can multiply. 2 times 5 is 10. 1 times 1 is 1. 10 divided by 1 is 10. So 10 students have pets. Okay? That is how you multiply a fraction times a whole number. Let's try that one more time. Put a 1 underneath the whole number. In this case, I cannot cross cancel anything because there's not one numerator and one denominator that have a common factor. So I'm just going to multiply the numerators together. 1 times 8 is 8. Multiply the denominators together. 3 times 1 is 3. Now I have what's called an improper fraction. 8 is bigger than 3. So I'm going to do my division. 8 divided by 3. How many times can 3 fit into 8? It can fit in 2 times. 3 can fit into 8 2 times. 3 times 2 is 6. That means there's 2 left over because I can fit 3 into 8 twice. 2 times 3 is 6, but this is 8, so there's 2 left over. 6, 7, 8. That's 2, right? So I put the leftover as my numerator and I keep my denominator. So 1/3 times 8 is 2 2/3. Now, last one, I have a mixed number, 2 3/10 times 10. So I'm going to change the mixed number to a fraction by multiplying the denominator times the whole number and adding the numerator. So 10 times 2 is 20, plus 3 is 23. And then I'm going to keep the denominator. Multiply that times 10. Remember, if I'm going to multiply times a whole number, I put the whole number over 1. Now I can cross cancel, right? 10 and 10 have a common factor of 10. So I can divide this by 10 and divide this by 10. This becomes 1, this becomes 1, and I get 23 over 1 times 1 over 1. And 23 times 1 is 23. 1 times 1 is 1. So the answer to this is 23. Okay? All right, so in this lesson, we're basically learning how to multiply fractions. We multiplied fraction times a fraction. We multiplied a fraction times a whole number. And we multiplied a fraction times a mixed number. All right. In your Learn and Do, on the next page, you have 2 IXL links. You have a link to your online textbook, which is called HMH Go Math. You have a textbook online, and we're going to start using that. But this right here should say 4.1, okay? And then you have some paper pencil practice. When you finish this Learn and Do, all of your practice assignments, then you can go on to do your snapshot.